Hello everyone, the video for today is going to be part 2 of reviewing CoreJJ. For more context on this video series, I heavily recommend that you check out part 1. The link for that is going to be in the description. But CoreJJ, he is one of the best supports in the world. He's currently playing on the Korean server and having a lot of success. And so this video today, we're going to look at him playing an enchanter, namely Renata. So without further ado, let's jump into this review. So for his enchanter game, we're going to have a look at Renata, and this is one of his most played enchanters in Korea, and it's also the best enchanter at dealing versus aggressive engagers or playmakers in the bot lane. And this is very common in Korea. People want to pick champions with high agency and engage and proactivity. And also Renata is just really hard to counter in general. You would need to opt into some heavy forms of scaling through enchanters, and that's just not very likely at a higher elo. So the first thing I want to talk about for his Renata is his rune setup. I think the runes here are fine for the most part. I'm just not a fan of Biscuits in general. I think Biscuits is a heavily overrated rune, and I would much prefer to see a stopwatch, especially versus TF is Draven versus Pike, which can get a lot of value, or futures if there's nothing else to go. And once again, I'm not going to go in depth about the double armor here. I've said it before, but he should go attack speed, adaptive, and then armor. I will also note that he went relic shields in an all-in lane, and this I'm not super convinced about. I will say that the relic providing more flat health can be useful in a volatile lane such as this, so we'll just see how it goes. I think both Spell Thieves and Relic could be viable here. So yeah, let's jump into it. So the first thing is that he wards away from lane to come back and to lane with Sweeper, and this is something that I've been experimenting with myself. The important thing is to have Sweeper for the mid bush. It's not necessarily to ward the mid bush. You just ward and then go back to base and swap to sweeps, because you can have Sweeper back up in time for lane. So what you can do is you can ward mid bush, or you can ward here, or you can ward here. You can ward anywhere on the map and then just base in time to come back to lane. And no, I just thought it was cool that he's doing this, because it's quite likely that Pike is going to try and sweep out mid bush, and then he would just get his ward cleared. Okay, so this matchup, Renata vs Pike. Renata does well against engagers, like I previously mentioned. Her passive is great versus melee champs, so that she can auto-attack a lot. Her E is great to disengage, it slows its shields. Her Q is great to disengage versus melee champs, and her W is great in all-in scenarios. So pretty much her entire kit is built for lanes like this. And we'll see what he does in the early lane here. So what I advocate for as an enchanter is to try and have a plan for each of the first 3 waves. The first wave, you need to auto-attack a lot and try and generate that HP advantage, because if you don't have an HP advantage on the minions for the second wave, then the melee champion can use their relic stacks to hit level 2 and then look for an all-in. It is slightly different here because he went for the relic shield, although it is worth noting that the execute range for ranged champs is lower than for melee champs. But I still want to see a lot of auto attacks to generate an HP advantage so that they can ensure the level 2 spike first. So we auto the ranged minion a couple times, the melee minion once, and I'm pretty happy with that. I have no idea why they try to go for an all-in here. They haven't burnt the Guardian. They haven't looked for an initial chunk and then to look for an all-in afterwards. I'm talking about the Draven and Pike, of course. So Pike should be posturing to control mid bush, and I mean he manages to find a hook, which is wild. But Samira, it turns out that she levels E, and then she just jumps away, and now Pike has no ignite and he got chunked. Something else I'm going to mention is that typically he doesn't level up too fast. So before he based, he hadn't leveled up an ability at all, and now he decides on E. I think it could be even better to not level up at all until you see what is necessary for any champion. So maybe in a situation like this, he could have held abilities, and now he levels up Q, and then he Qs the Pike here and pushes him away. E is also perfectly fine in a fight like this, because they're not going to have the all-in threat. And here, This is akin to the first game that we talked about with Nautilus versus Pike. Here he's Renata versus Pike, and he's just going to back himself to dodge. And if he doesn't dodge, it's bad. So he doesn't dodge, and then Draven kind of starts to overstep, and they have a summon advantage from the level 1 fight. So I might give him the benefit of the doubt here and say that they have 4 summoners versus 3 summoners. This is a bit of a visual bug, but they've only used Ignite, and they have the HP advantage. So maybe he's less scared of an all-in situation like this. With that being said, if Pike hooks here, Pike uses his Halo Blades orders here. Draven is just standing back here and ordering. CoreJJ is going to be in a really bad spot. This is not going to be a favorable trade for him at all. So luckily it turns out that the Draven is running forwards like an idiot, and they use their summoner spell advantage and the HP advantage to look for a favorable all-in. But this is again not giving the enemy team as little opportunities to gain advantages as possible. If the enemy team play this well, he's in a really bad situation. So Pike hook, 3 hob orders, Draven, couple of hob orders from back here, and then yeah, very hard to counterplay that. So the last thing I'm going to mention about this little fight here is that CoreJJ flashes away before he is in 1 auto range of death, which is something that I learned from watching this. So what he's staying around, and now if he gets auto attacked 1 more time and then he tries to flash, then Pike can flash and auto and kill. However, he is out of a range of an auto attack here, so Pike cannot flash forwards and auto attack. It won't kill her. So that's a really cool micro thing to note as well. And as we saw in the first game, his fight assessment and execution is generally quite on point, even if his positioning and matchup assessment isn't always there. Okay, so he's just kind of hanging around, and the first time that I watched this, I wanted to see him base a lot sooner. He can assess in this kind of situation here. He has no cooldowns, no sums, very low health. No way he can save the Samira here. So I want to see him just base instantly and try to come back out onto the map with full health and with a pink and a refill potentially, and then go from there. But he hangs around for a very long time. He does try to help the Samira, but once again, I think you can determine pretty quickly that there's no helping Samira. So she tries to pretend she's a Krog and dies, and once again, the Renata's just hanging around in lane for a very long time, getting some XP, but otherwise not accomplishing too much. And yeah, Renata could easily have come out of base in time with Samira full health with a pink ward and pressured the map the exact same way. Like, she can't get the XP range here in the 1v2, so this is literally just a time sink. So yeah, the 2v2, although the straight up 2v2 went well, the wave state is a bit tricky and there are no sums for them, whereas Pike still does have flash. So we'll just see how it plays out. And here is the start of CoreJJ looking quite uncomfortable on Renata, or just like sometimes struggling to hit skill shots in general. Like, he's good at dodging, he's good at the cerebral play, but we saw a lot of Naut hooks missing, and now we see Renata hooks, Renata Qs missing. And this is like one of the easiest lanes possible to land skill shots. You just Q on Draven axes, and if he doesn't catch his Draven axe, then he's a lot weaker. Pike, he's going to channel his Q, and then that's the freest Q of your life, because Pike slows himself, and he's just a really easy Q target. So I think that CoreJJ should have been much more deliberate in when he uses Q this game, and you're going to see more examples. Here's the first one. No excuse to miss a Q like this. And he's missing a lot of uptime with auto attacks here. And a lot of Renata's strength comes from her passive, in terms of, auto-attacking a lot. That's why you take the attack speed on her as well. Trying to maximize damage in this fight. So here, Pyke already used Q. There's no reason for Renata to spend so much time here doing absolutely nothing. She should be spamming auto-attacks right now. CoreJJ eventually does start auto-attacking and he Ws himself, so that was really good. He leveled up and then he put a point in W and instantly cast it on himself when he hit level 3, so that was really good to see. And yeah, they need to make a plan to fix this wave. They need the following wave, they need this wave to crash. And if they can't make the following wave crash, they're going to be in a really rough spot. So what I think needs to happen here, it's absolutely necessary, is that Renata and Viego shove this wave, or Viego hangs around and helps to crash the following wave, or the bot wave is just going to be permanently in a really bad spot. So we can see what I mean here. The wave is screwed, and Renata's all the way in base, and Viego is probably going to start pathing away. Whereas if they emphasize shoving this wave and getting a good wave state, then, you know, it's necessary. And so here, Samira is tasked with trying to crash a cannon wave by herself with no sums versus a Pyke with flash and ignite coming up. So what we're going to see is, fortunately, there's another incompetent Pyke on the server. I don't know what's happening, but there are two ways that Pyke can play this. The hardest one is that he E flashes, and he flashes on top of her and then paths backwards, and then Qs Samira backwards. The easier to execute one is that he holds his Q. He just auto-attacks, and then he throws the hook here. Because Samira doesn't have W yet. And then Samira's dead. And then Samira's just completely out of the game. You know, bad wave state, and dies once again. So luckily, another incompetent Pyke, and I believe this stems from the Renata and the Viego's decision to not hang around and crash this wave. But what CoreJJ does here, pathing straight back bot, is completely necessary in trying to, you know, fix this wave state. See what they can do. So the E goes a little bit off into the distance. Speed this up a little bit. And this wave, absolutely necessary to crash. And so Renata needs to be spamming autos. And she does. Okay, they managed to get a pretty good wave state. Awesome. And this is what needed to happen earlier, but eventually they did get there. And now they can let the wave push into them, and they can gank on the following wave with Viego. So that's what I think the best play is, for them to leave the wave alone and then to ping assistance on this following wave. Turns out that they have another friend here. So TF ports down, but CoreJJ's wave state is good, so it doesn't matter. And the wave's going to crash. And here's another point that I think is useful to note, is that he saves his relic stacks for hard to farm minions under tower. You obviously only want to use it on the highest golds minions, so you want to use it on cannons and melees. So he's always going to use it on the cannon here, and then he's not just using it on one of these instantly. Like this melee here is going to be hard to farm for the Samira, so he's going to save his relic stack and secure the last hit on the melee there. And this is where my praise of his wave management is going to start to falter. So after the melees, he should base, and he should come back out of base onto the map, pressuring through mid, and then potentially crashing the following bot wave. Right now, for the next while, he's going to be an XP sponge. He's going to be standing around, soaking up XP, achieving absolutely nothing, and donating the enemy team information of his whereabouts constantly. So keep in mind, he could have already been in base. He's had 15 seconds to base, and now he's hanging around, and he realizes now that they can't contest prior here. This was evident beforehand. Samira is low in HP. They're down in tempo versus the enemy bot lane. They don't have any vision here. The jungler's top side. There's so much stacking up against being able to contest prior on this following wave. And so what's going to happen is that this wave is going to slow push, and Samira is going to be fine for this wave, and then the following wave, once it starts to stack and push further out, then CoreJJ comes back down bot, crashes the stacked wave, and then all is good. And all the meanwhile, he can be pressuring around mid. Mid waves meet first, so he could be pressuring on this mid wave before that following bot wave comes. He can be looking for ganks, counter ganks, helping to shove, vision denial, vision information, the list goes on. This is a big slip up. And honestly, this is something that I see in a lot of my students as well. When they're down, when they're losing lane, when they're down in tempo and prio and everything, they just hang around and they become XP sponges. And they don't realize in time that they are going to be accomplishing nothing and they should rather be around mid, accepting reality, and then crashing the following bot wave. So for the students that are listening to this, you're not alone. CoreJJ is doing it too. But yeah, he's going to be accomplishing nothing. And he's going to be standing around. And it's self-evident that the last 30 to 45 seconds, he could have been basing, pressuring around mid. And pressuring on this following bot wave to crash. Okay, so here's the following bot wave, and they decide that they want to try and crash even the next one, which is perfectly fine. You want to try and crash as big of a wave state as possible in a 2v2 setting so that they can't stop it because you have more minions. So here's the lucky part, is that they just break the freeze. Absolutely no reason. Another incompetent Pyke moment. Pyke runs up and just one-shots the cannon, and now blue team's wave is pushing into them, and now they can just happily sit back here and play the lane how they want without having to overextend. Very fortunate. They didn't get punished. And he's just confidently juking around. And here, I'm not quite sure what to make of fights like this. It feels very limit testy. And it's obvious that he is confident that Draven is lower HP so that he can posture forwards for things like this. What I don't understand is why he's standing like by the bush. He can be doing this in his melee minions very easily, and he can be looking to auto attack, push Draven off, and then Pyke is useless. But he's extremely disrespectful here. And yeah, he dies and then Draven dies. It's not a very controlled setting, but I will appreciate his Chad energy and not shying away from a fight. I still think he could have approached the fight a lot better. Let's skip forwards a little bit. So he does rush Tabis versus Draven and Pyke. I think that's perfectly fair. Here, I don't want him to pass bot unless he is needed bot to crash a wave. So all of this is wasted time again. What this should be instead is we can go back and he's in base, and then he decides if Samira can shove this wave under tower without his help. And the answer is clearly yes. Draven is dead. The wave is right here. So CoreJJ parts mid instead. And once again, he is going to play the vision game around here. He's going to put his pink, hopefully, in the dot bush here, and he can pressure on this wave, or he can link up with his jungler, anything, right? And so he eventually realizes it, although he realizes it far too late in my opinion. He could already be here. He should already be here. And I'm going to avoid results-based analyses for the most part, but in this situation, he could have helped dissuade this gank. But in every situation, he would have been able to accomplish something. And so now he's piling bot. I like this in terms of preventing this wave from crashing. The other possibility is that since it is in the 8 to 14 minutes mark, they can prevent the Herald from getting taken. If they can. Only if they can. And so maybe they want to sack Heralds because their mid laner is dead and they don't have information on the Pyke, and so if there is a fight around here, then they have to concede. That's perfectly reasonable. So the alternative would be to run bot and try to generate a bot lead. Okay, so he's pathing bot and he wants to prevent this wave from crashing and potentially look to kill the Draven maybe. So there's a bit of a fight here. And I'm going to note once again that he misses a Q, which is just unacceptable in this lane. He should use it as the Draven axe connects to the ground. and he should use it, or he should use it when the pike is channeling Q. So here he just uses it when pike was W'd, and then it's just a really bad Q. And he uses his own W very early, but it should still be fine. And this is just Renata's kit versus all-in. So he didn't play this fight well. It's just more of a cerebral approach to the fight. He doesn't mind taking it. And then unfortunately he dies on the back end. So he's looking a little bit uncomfortable on Renata here. But he's still playing confidently, if that makes any sense. So yeah, bot wave crashes, he paths mid. This is what needed to happen earlier. Yeah, I'm just hanging around bot again. You just have a look at what happens here. I don't want to spend too much time in the early game going over things that I already have covered. But Draven steps too far forwards, and then it's just relatively simple. Pick up a kill there. Gonna skip past this section a little bit. Playing well on his limits. Trying to hang around and save the Viego, and then the Viego-Renata combo starts to come into effect, which is just insane. So his job's done. And he's going to pass towards mid, hopefully. So once again, he's unsure where he should be, and he should be pathing here a lot quicker and more decisively. And he finally gets to pink into the dot bush here. He also misses a window towards over the dragon pit. So he has 3 wards right now, and he has plenty of pressure with which to drop a ward over here. His teammates are right here. Yeah, it's just a great opportunity to ward over the dragon pit. And this will be a very valuable ward for the upcoming contest around Bot River. And this is, I don't know how to review this. This is actually psychotic. It's next level. It is very, his fight assessment is just unparalleled. So he determines that he can kind of posture back into the dragon pit here and get engaged on, and that his teammates would be able to follow up here. And now maybe you can help me. Maybe I'm being results focused, and maybe he was just limit testing and it turned out well. But maybe he realized that this is going to work out, and that his Fed Viego can come around through here and carry. I am not sure, but either way, it turns out well. And this is the enemy team for sure got baited here, and this is a pretty game-winning play from him, honestly. And it's a cerebral game-winning play. It's not a micro game-winning play, which I think is quite in line with CoreJJ's identity or playstyle. Okay, speed it up a little bit here again. Maybe we can have a look at this fight. So once again, okay, so he lands this Q, but he didn't make it, he didn't give himself a very good chance of landing this Q, and he didn't even use the Q2 knockback effect. So here he Qs again towards this area, and then they're going to both get stunned, or Draven's going to be much further out of position and die a lot cleaner, or just die at all. So in the mid to late, we can just have a look at the scoreboard quickly. He has missed windows with which to facilitate his mid jungle, and luckily his mid jungle is just popping off naturally. So what you want to do when you are losing bot is to try and generate a win condition elsewhere, and not just be AFK bot hoping to get carried. So we kind of failed in that, but luckily his teammates are carrying their weight appropriately. I'm going to speed this up again. Now they have a mid-tower discrepancy, which is very scary. It's very hard to play a game as an engager or an enchanter with a mid-tower discrepancy, because the mid to late is so heavily centered around mid-prior, and you can't get mid-prior when you have a mid-tower discrepancy. So his game plan is pretty much going to be to get carried by his mid-jungle. So once again, he is failing to ward mid, which I think is extremely important. You can tell if this low Draven is going to try and contest next mid wave. You can potentially set up a pick. And you can just drop a mid ward, not contest mid wave, and then do this exact same thing. So he's kind of just posturing around. I'm not a fan of this ward. I was praising him earlier for dodging common pink locations, so I want to see a ward over here or maybe over here to dodge sweeps, umbral glaives, pinks. And he could have easily dropped a ward around here, so he should put a ward here and he should put a ward maybe around here. And that luscious green section that I have talked about in my vision video where it doesn't get pinked by any of the bushes. And then that would be, yeah, that would be his role in this game. Ward mid, put 2 wards defensively on a quadrant, and then hope for the best. Yeah, again, I'm not feeling the deliberate nature of these ward placements. I see a ward here, and a ward here. This is overkill. I'm not sure what the plan is. If he is using all of his wards on top side, then I feel like they're going to sack Dragon. And if they are going to sack Dragon, then they can get a lot more pressure on top side. They can get deeper wards when the enemy team is doing Dragon. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Again, not the biggest fan of his ward placements. So he's basing getting his wards once again. And yeah. Okay, so they get Dragon. And the point about the ward still stands. It's 3 wards right next to each other. This is not good. But once again, he is just posturing around mid, and this is pretty much all you can do, and hope that the enemy team messes up, and that your team carries. He's kind of just streaking around, hoping for the best. He dies. Bunch more fighting is going on. And it's worth noting that he is fully indexing into the tank build. I think this is a mistake, honestly. If you go this heavy into the tank builds, you can't provide the utility that you need to in the mid to late game, where you want to have more uptime with your spells as an enchanter. He's not going to be frontlining and tanking. He's just never going to have the tankiness for that. I would much prefer... Locket is fine when you do need to be more defensively oriented, but I think pairing that up with Lucidity is going to be much better in the mid to late. Tabis is going to help the laning phase a lot, but again, I'm not sure if I want to make that sacrifice personally. And then building more so into tank and having practically no utility in your items is a little bit questionable. But that's his decision this game. And finally, he gets a mid lane ward. This needs to be happening a lot more often, and it needs to happen at the start. So what should happen here? He powers out a base, sounding like a broken record, but honestly, this is the best way to pressure in the mid to late. He can help with the fight around here, and then he moves mid, and he shoves this mid wave. He gets a mid ward, and then he moves down here, and he can drop a ward over here or a ward over here. Once again, he puts 2 wards very close to each other. But yeah, I'm gonna try not to talk about ward placement too much more. It's still going to be hovering around mid, but struggling to get mid prio and hoping there are missteps. We're gonna have a look at one more big fight, and then I think that would be enough for this game. Kind of throws out Q and ult a bit willy-nilly here. I'm not sure about this one. He tries to flash Q. Okay, and he misses, and then he just decides that if it hit, this would be fine, but yeah. And there's a big ARAM fight. And he's not really doing much because he uses flash and his ult already, and his Fed Viego's going to carry. Speeding up a little bit more, they get Baron, and this entire game he's been carried, and he hasn't really helped his win conditions as much as he could have. So, I'm going to quickly summarize this game as well. So one more thing that I do want to mention is that he kept his sweeper the whole game. And this whole early lane, they had a really bad wave state. And having sweeper when your bot wave state is permanently bad it's worse than having trinket. You need to provide vision for your lane in order to safely crash a wave state like this. In the Nautilus game, he had control over bot wave state, and then he could easily find roaming windows to pressure around mid. However, yeah, there was a giant section of this game where he needed to have trinket, and that sweeper was going to accomplish absolutely nothing. So fix wave state and put a trinket, to make sure that you don't get ganked while you're trying to crash a wave state. Apart from that, he needs to hold his Renata Q and be much more deliberate with when he is using it. I talked about when he can use it versus Draven and versus Pike. He should be much more diligent about when he is bot and not just be an AFK bot, being an XP sponge, pressuring absolutely nothing on the map. He should be posturing mid a lot more and then move back bot on a wave that he wants to crash. And that was a recurring theme in this game. That would have allowed his mid and his jungle to become a more fearsome force to carry, where him being bot accomplished nothing for the state of bot lane anyway. And just some more warding optimizations. Sometimes he's warding very close together, sometimes he's not even warding mid, and that is a very easy fix for anyone who wants to ward better. So I might get hate for this, but I want to call it how it is, and at least I've backed it up by analysis and evidence. I think this game, he had dreadful wave state and roaming fundamentals. It was really low levels of play. And honestly, he looked like a random solo queue player with no brain. And maybe he was in limit test mode for Renata, but Renata isn't even that new of a champion anymore. So I think this can just go to show that the pro players, they always need to polish their fundamentals, and they always have vast room for improvement. And I think it's important to distinguish that I'm criticizing his play this game, not the player himself. And I'm also not saying I could and would have done everything better. This is just what we should all strive to perform like in terms of the improvements. I think it's handy to see pros struggling with the same issues. Pros do not make magical, sexy plays the whole time. They're playing the same game. They're speaking the same language. Sometimes they carry, sometimes they get carried. Just generally, they are more polished and consistent. So yeah, this game that he played, it does not have to be representative of his whole skill level. Just there were a lot of improvements and basic errors that he made that should not be made. That point serves as a decent segue into my next point, where I briefly want to talk about the danger of idolizing pro players. If you idolize a player, you run the risk of copying everything they do without question, without full situational context, and without integrating your own understanding of the game and what's actually happening. I think it's healthy to admire or to respect or to draw motivation from, or even to integrate parts of their gameplay into your own. I think it's also healthy to criticize, or at least reflect on incongruences you notice in their play too. If they do something you don't really understand why they did it, then you just try to really get into the details and understand what happened and if it was a good decision or not, and try to detach yourself from the results. So yeah, at the end of the day, you want to be the best player you can be, and that will always be better than the shadow of another player. I've had personal experience with this issue a lot during my life, where I played competitive tennis since I was 8 years old. And what I learned is that you don't want to become a carbon copy of someone else's technique. I can use the great tennis players, for example. You can respect the greats, like Federer, like Nadal. You can respect their professionalism, their consistency, maybe even their athleticism. You can integrate parts of their approach to their game, maybe like taking the ball earlier or coming to the net more often. But what you don't do is watch hours of footage of close-ups of them like hitting forehands and backhands. That's just not the path to mastery. It has to come from within yourself and integrating your knowledge and expressing it kind of as a language to understand how the game should be played. I want to use a bit of an analogy here as well. So I want to mention the Kung Fu Panda movie plots, and I hope that most of you are familiar with these, but for those who aren't, Po is the main character. He's a big fat panda who doesn't know how to do Kung Fu, and he's kind of thrust into the middle of this Kung Fu world where he has to defeat the bad guys. And he learns to become one of the best Kung Fu artists by embracing who he is himself. He integrates his own physique and his own personal experiences to be his best and not copying other people's styles of Kung Fu. And I believe this notion is somewhat of an axiom, and this is why this movie line was so successful and why it resonated, at least with myself. It hits the nail on the head in terms of trying to become the best you can at any craft. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope that you guys learned something, and if you did enjoy this type of video or have any type of feedback for me at all, I would appreciate it if you let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, please feel free to join my School of Support Discord server. The link is going to be in the description below, as usual, just to become part of a growing support community, or for individual coaching, or just to get access to cool support resources. Thanks again for watching. Bye.